Well, hello, I hope you've enjoyed your February break. Did you manage to get out into the snow and make some snowmen and snow angels and maybe go a bit of sledging? So for the first week back, I thought I'd tell you a story which is a folk tale. Do you know what a folk tale is? Well, folk tale basically means people's story. All over the country there are different folk tales. They are stories that people told each other. And they were told and retold so much that they became very well known or popular. And so rather than just someone's story, they became a folk tale. Usually no one really knows where the first story was told or who told it, because it's been told so often. It becomes part of what we call the folklore tradition. And I'm going to tell you a folk tale that comes from a village in East Lothian called Elphinstone. Now, if you go to Elphinstone, it's a lovely wee village in East Lothian. Opposite the primary school, across the road, on a small grassy area, you will see a large stone. Some people call it a bullet stone because of its shape. Very heavy. It's impossible to lift. Well, there's two folk tales about that stone that I know of. There's probably more. They both involve a witch called Meg. Now, according to the first folk tale, Meg had an elf as a servant. And one day, when she was travelling with her servant, she stopped for a picnic. And she put out her food and she started to eat it. And the elf was very hungry. But Meg didn't share the food. And after she was having a little bit of a nap after eating, the elf tiptoed to steal some of the food. But Meg was a witch and she she knew what was going on. She opened her eyes. Ah, why are you stealing my food? And after that, as a punishment, she trapped the elf in the stone. And according to that folktale, that's where the village got its name. Elf in Stone. That folktale was developed by children in the primary school there. It's really clever because, like many folktales, it gives us an idea of where the name for the village might have come from. But you know what? There's an even older folktale, a folktale that goes back more than 100 years, about the same stone and about the same witch. I think the first folktale is better told by children from the school, but this old folktale is the one I'm going to tell you now. Now, Meg was a witch, as you know, but she was a very popular one. She had loads of friends who were also witches. She was a kind and fun witch. She wasn't one of those I'm turning into a spider type witch. You know, she was a kind of fun one. And she was married to the blacksmith, and she lived in the smithy. The smithy was where the blacksmith had his work. Most villages had a smithy in those days because there was no cars and buses, so people would often use horses either to ride or to pull their carts, and they needed the horses to be shoed. And so the blacksmith, he was very good at ironwork and shoeing horses. It was a very important and tough job. So Meg was very busy during the day, and so by the time the evening came and it was time to go to bed, she was looking forward to a bit of relaxation and some time to herself. Well, she would wait until her husband was fast asleep. And when she was sure he was fast asleep, that was when Meg would meet her friends, her fellow witches, for a bit of witchy fun. Now, they had to meet away from the village, so that no one would see or hear them. So the place they would meet was called Harry's Burn, which is a couple of miles away. Far enough to be out of earshot, but not too far away. At Harry's Burn in the evening, all the witches would fly there, and he would have a kind of witchy party every now and then. Well, you might think that Meg would travel on a broomstick, being a witch, but according to this folk tale, she didn't have a broomstick, but of course she did have magic. And so she travelled to Harry's Burn in a different way. Outside the smithy, there was this big stone. And what she would do is she would use her magic, bing, to turn it into a magnificent horse, a stallion. Beautiful black stallion. And there she would ride on this horse to Harry's Burn. I can just see her with this beautiful horse with its mane of hair. And when it arrived, of course, it would be thirsty. And then she would let the horse drink at the burn. But as soon as the horse had drunk as much as it wanted to, she would use her magic again to turn the horse back into the stone. But why did she do that? I'll tell you why. Because one of the games that the witches loved to play was Chuckie. Have you heard of that? Well, Chuckie was the game I used to play when I was young, but not in the same way as Meg played it. What you have to do is have 4 stones. You can put the 4 stones on the ground and then you throw up a 5th stone and you have to pick up the 4 stones and catch the 5th stone before it lands. There's different ways of playing it as well. Sometimes people put the 4 stones on top of their hands like this, and you'd have to chuck them up and catch. And lots of different ways of playing Chuckie. Well, the way Meg played it was pretty dangerous, but she was a witch, so she had magic. She had the 4 stones on the ground, and then this huge, great big boulder, this big stone. She would throw it up into the air magically and quickly pick up the other 4 stones before this boulder came down and pumped her on the head. Of course, she could use her magic. She liked to time it so the boulder just almost hit her head, but not quite. And all the other witches would laugh and they would have great fun. And that's why this boulder is called Meg's Chuck. It's her Chuckie stone. Well, after the game, she would say goodbye to all our witchy friends and they would all fly off in different ways. Some would have broomsticks, some would be flying on pots or pans or whatever. And of course, Meg would turn the stone back into her magnificent stallion. And she'd ride back to Elphinstone. And when she got back home to the smithy, she would give the horse some water and then, bing, turn it back to stone. And then she went to bed, and in the morning her husband knew nothing about it. Well, that was over 100 years ago, and you don't have smithies like you used to, but the stone is still there. And as far as I know, it's never been turned back into a horse since the last time that Meg used it. So maybe there's an elf and a horse trapped in that stone. And if so, I wonder if it's possible to change the stone back into the horse and free the elf. You'd have to sit on it and try out magic words. What do you think the spell was? Any ideas? Abracadabra is too obvious. I don't know. I've sat on that stone many times and tried lots of magic words, but so far it hasn't worked. But be careful. If you sit on Meg's Chuck and you say the right words to turn it back into the horse, you better be a good rider, because I think that horse is going to be desperate for some exercise. And right behind you, there could be a very, very hungry elf. So watch out for your packed lunch. So that's my telling of the folk tale of Meg's Chuck. There'll be different versions of that story, and I'm sure people who live in the village know the stories and have different versions of them. Maybe you could learn one of the folk tales, find out what the details are and a way to tell it. And you know what? You can even make up your own folk tales. And who knows, that story might get told and told and retold and retold, and your story become part of the folklore tradition. If you'd like to do that, I can help you with your teachers. Oh, and one last thing. If you play Chuckie, do it with small pebbles, not big stones, like Meg. And make sure you play it safely. Anyway, it's been lovely to tell you another story, and I hope I'll be able to tell you a story next week. And you know what? I'm really quite excited about the idea of you making up your folk tale. What's it going to be about? A witch, a dragon, fairies, elves, wizards? It's up to you. That's the thing about folk tales. It's up to you to make a story that you want. Till next week. Cheerio.